Hey guys, this is your DIY video that is going to talk about making a T-chart and a line graph for your project. So the past couple of days we've been talking about unit rate. We're going to talk a little bit more about unit rate on filling in this T-chart here. But in the meantime, let's reflect and look on the rubric. So after you found the unit rate, it says that you need to come up with a T-chart that represents a proportional relationship between the number of cans purchased and the cost of the cans. This is an example problem of how you can create your T-chart based off of your information. Here they call it a ratio table. It is the same thing as a T-chart. Okay, so let's look at the situation. It says use the given information to complete the table and graph below. A pudding recipe uses 1 egg for every 2 cups of milk. We are going to start to build our T-chart. So we have 1 egg for every 2 cups of milk. So in order to complete this T-chart, also called a ratio table, we have to look at the process in the middle, how we get from 1 to 2. And we're going to do that using scale factor. That's what the process is. And remember that scale factor is always multiplication. So in order to see what our process is, we have to check it out and see. If we say 1 times what gives us 2, you know that 1 times 2 is 2. So that is our process that we're going to use to build our chart. Now, for your project, you would do 1 can of food or box of food is 98 cents, so to speak, whatever you came up with for your unit rate. So your process in the middle would be 1 times the money equals the cans of food. And you're going to build your T-chart this way. So now let's look at what 2 is. 2 times 2 gives me 4 cups of milk. Moving on down, 3 times 2 gives me 6 cups of milk. 4 times 2 gives me 8 cups of milk. 5 times 2 gives me 10 cups of milk. Now we have to look at it and say, if we were going to look for any amount, any number of eggs, how many cups of milk would we say? We would have to say whatever the number may be, which is represented by the variable x, times 2. All right, and that will give us how many cups of milk. So this is how you build your T-chart for your project, and we're going to be dealing with cans and money, but it's going to be very similar to your situation. Now you also have to create a line graph, so it's going to look something like this graph for your ratio table. So keep in mind that the y-axis is vertical, the x-axis is horizontal. So you're going to have to build your chart, make sure you have your labels, however fits your project. So let's graph and take a look at a couple of things for this relationship. So, all right, so we graphed our ratio table, also known as a T-chart. And to refresh your memory on how you graph, you take the x value and you look at 1, and then you go up to 2 and you put a dot. So you can see our dots, how we graphed it. I think you're all comfortable in graphing, but let's take a look at this graph and see what it means. We have a straight line. It is linear. The word linear means straight line. And the reason why we have a straight line is because we have a proportional relationship. So let's talk a little bit about a proportional relationship, and you need to take some notes in your journal about what I'm saying. It's very important. Mucho importante. So we're going to talk about the rate of change in our T-chart. So we have to look at what our y value is going up by. So if you go from 2 to 4, Yeah. If you go from 2 to 4, you'll see that it's going up by 2s, plus 2. 4 to 6 is plus 2. 6 to 8 is plus 2. 8 to 10 is plus 2. Now, for the rate of change, we not only have to look at the y values, we have to also look at the x values. And in this case, we're going up by 1. So plus 1, plus 1, plus 1, plus 1. So we have a constant rate of change of 2. And guess what? In this situation, that is what your multiplier is. 2's all the way down. 2's all the way down for the rate of change. That's what your process is down the middle. So this is a proportional relationship because I have a constant rate of change. I have a straight line. And if I were to put this equation in y equals form, so if I were to write y, oh, here's the equation box right here. The equation for the ratio table, if I wanted to know what any amount of eggs I needed, I would write y equals 2 times the variable x. Because if you were to substitute in ever how many eggs right here, it would give you how many cups of milk you would need. I don't know if you have to do an equation on your rubric or not, but we can look at it later, so hold up a question card if you need to know that. You do have to do an equation. So for your project, y would be the amount of money. Guess how much money you're going to spend for your donation? $50. So it would be 50 equals, 50 equals, let's say you did green beans and they came out to 98 cents a can, 98 cents times X. So what does X mean in this case? The number of cans that you can purchase. All right, so this right here just kind of gives you an example of what your T-chart should look like. What your equation should look like. And it's not going to be this exact equation. It's going to be whatever your situation is. So now let's go in and look at filling out your unit rate. What does unit rate mean? Unit rate means how much one costs or how much we need of one. So in our situation, we have 2 cups of milk for every 1 egg. Because that's what the chart tells us. Now, the scale factor between rows 2 and 4. So let's go and look and see what the scale factor is between rows 2 and 4. So I already told you that the scale factor was your process here in the center. So my scale factor, if I wanted to look at row 4, so to speak, I would say that my scale factor would be 2 times 2. All right, so let's see what else this thing is supposed to teach you. Oh, look here, we're going to do unit rate again. We're going to do unit rate again. So I have a proportion set up. I have my labels, just like you are all taught to do. I have for every 2 cups, I need 1 egg. And so now it's wanting me to find how many cups I need for 3½ eggs. Well, I'd hate to be the person getting a half an egg, but this is what we're going to do. So how do we find this out? We have to determine the missing information. Pretend like there's an X right here, because that's what the unknown is. So we're going to use a variable. So here we go with cross multiplying because cross products are equal. So I can say 1 times X simply gives me X equals 2 times 3.5. And All right, so we did 3.5 times 2. Remember, when you're multiplying decimals, you multiply like the decimal is not there, and you have to back in the number of times it moved at the end. So here it moved 1 time, here it moved 0 times, so I'm going to move the decimal a total of 1 spot, and that's what this red line represents. So my answer is 7. So this one is pretty easy. If I have 3.5 eggs, I'm going to need 7 cups of milk or whatever it is. All right, I want you to pause the video and try to do this one on your own. Whenever you have done that, you can raise your hand or hold up your check mark for us to come around and check it, because you're going to try to solve this with decimals on your own solo. All right, number 7, use scale factor to determine the missing information. Wow, these are some big numbers. All right, now, so let's look at number 7 and number 8, and if you can figure these two out, it will be extra credit. Extra credit for all of you that desperately need it. So try it. Try it on your own. The key will be available. Hold up your check mark or raise your hand. If you think you have 7 and 8 right, you will get extra credit. All right, my friends, that's about all you're going to need to know in order to make your T-chart and your line graph. So good luck with that, and we're going to work on it today and maybe tomorrow. This is Mrs. Charles, Mrs. Gaines, and Mrs. Patterson, Inspiring Young Minds to Learn.